Need another one?
Four of us, five of us are here. Okay. With the call to order the meeting, clerk read the roll.
I was stuck out there.
Addo?
Here.
Ella?
Here.
Drake?
Here.
Gardeau? Gentile?
Here.
Salemi?
Here.
Taylor?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay. Item 2, public comments relative to agenda items. Okay. Approval of minutes of the June 29th, 2023 meeting.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Are there any additions or deletions? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed? Okay. Item 4, presentation by REA Resource Recovery Systems. Before we get into it, the ground rules, Kelly?
Afternoon. Is this on?
Yeah, you're good.
Good afternoon, commissioners. There are no ground rules. We have a presentation from REA, and there's an opportunity for questions and answers after their presentation or during their presentation, however you would like to. We have the time of this meeting to discuss with them their submittal.
Yeah, I guess as part of submittals, there was questions that were asked and questions that are responding. And I assume that that REA will address themselves. Or if there's questions that commissioners have about the questions and answers that were submitted to REA by the MDC staff, they would be an appropriate issue of question and answer.
I believe that some of the answers to the questions by REA said that they'd want to discuss them during this meeting.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Kelly. Okay. Okay, presentation. Who's going to start it?
Bring it up. Let's bring it up.
Yeah. We got to get our presentation up on the screen.
You need this.
We can pick it up on all the screens, can't we?
Yep.
We'll get it up. There it is.
Here you go.
Hello, my name's Al Barbarata. I'm the A in REA. Eric Metz, the E in REA, is our operating engineer, and Dr. Richard Parnas, the R in REA. I want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to present our unique brown grease to B100 biodiesel system. What we'd like to do is go through a 10 to 15 minute presentation, and then we would be prepared to answer questions. We did prepare for the committee some hard copies of some documents that I think will refer back to a lot of the questions that were asked by the MDC that we responded to. We apologize for the print being so small, but Lisa told me that they enlarged it so everybody could see it. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Richard Parnas, who will take us through this initial presentation. Thank you.
Sure, I'll try to just go through the little PowerPoint stuff in about 10 minutes or so and leave most of the time for questions and discussion. We did bring some show and tell. You know, we're talking about brown grease to biodiesel, and at our Danbury plant, we've taken in over 60,000 gallons of fog at this point, and I just brought a little sample of the brown grease that we've extracted from it. That'll actually be the feedstock into the main reactor system that we'll outline as we go through this. If anybody wants to look at it, we can certainly pass it around. Don't open the bottle, you know. You folks that are associated with wastewater treatment probably have a pretty good idea of what's in here. So here's a picture of the three of us in Danbury. As Al mentioned, I'm the R in REA, Eric's the E in REA, and Al's the A in REA. And we just have a brief description of ourselves here. Basically, I worked for 20 years at UConn. I'm a chemical engineer by background. MIT undergrad, UCLA graduate school. And while I was at UCLA, not at UCLA, while I was at UConn, developed the technology for what we're doing. But that was at a university with beakers and things like that. We built a first reactor there. And then as I met up with Eric and Al, we developed the company, did a pilot project in New Haven that we have some data on, and prototyped the thing and made a few thousand gallons of biodiesel from brown grease at the New Haven waste treatment plant. And then we moved on to Danbury. So I'm not going to read these to you. You folks have them. I just want to just introduce them to you. So, you know, our mission is to help wastewater treatment plants transition to become resource recovery facilities. Right now, take dirty water and make it into clean water, but there's also a lot of opportunities to recover resources, and brown grease is one of those calorie-laden resources that everybody has a problem with. Basically, all 80,000 waste treatment plants in the world have a problem with this stuff. Sometimes it's worse than others, but in most places that I'm aware of, it's a big problem. So our job is to convert that, first of all, make that problem disappear and convert it into a saleable product to support the activity. We have some text here that tells a little bit, you know, sort of like a 50,000-foot view of how we do this. We have an automated and continuous flow system that we've just finished building in Danbury. A couple of you have been down to see it. It's just recently completed. We went into operation last week, right around the 4th of July holiday. And as I said, we've taken in over 60,000 gallons of fog, extracted some brown grease, and, you know, this is an example of it. The brown grease that we're going to make into biodiesel, I've made it into biodiesel many, many times in my lab. We made a few thousand gallons of it at our demonstration project in New Haven. So we know we can do this. It passes the B100, the ASTM tests, and you can use it in basically any diesel motor. It's basically a drop-in replacement for petrodiesel. Most of the diesel engine manufacturers now are warrantying it up to 20% or higher blends with petrodiesel. Some are warrantying up to 100%. So it can be widely used, whether for generating electricity or directly into transportation vehicles. The way we got our contract in Danbury is when we were running the New Haven demo, the Danbury folks came up with some of their municipal fleet trucks. We put our biodiesel into their trucks. They drove them around. They were very happy, and they said, you know, we're doing the general upgrade at the plant, and we can include this. They were mandated to develop a fog receiving facility there. And we said, we'll come in, we'll do the fog receiving facility and take the brown grease and make it into biodiesel on site. So that's what we're doing there. Everybody here probably knows more about regulations than I do, but of course there's a great deal of regulatory pressure. Here in Connecticut, for example, right now, heating oil is mandated to have 5% biodiesel in it. In the next few years, it's going to be mandated to go to 20% biodiesel. All the heating oil folks are scrambling to secure biodiesel supplies. So, for example, in Danbury, we have an offtake agreement with a large heating oil supplier downstate that'll take 100% of our offtake. And they say if we build any more plants in Connecticut, they'll take all the biodiesel we can possibly make, because hitting that 20% mandate is going to be tough. A lot of text on where we think our technology checks the boxes as far as the wastewater treatment industry. Basically, we're going to turn a costly waste management problem into a revenue-generating stream. Lots of different possible business arrangements between us and municipalities or waste management entities that can do this, okay? Some people would prefer this type of arrangement or that type of arrangement. We can do it as a municipally owned system. We can do it as a privately owned system, some kind of partnership, many possibilities. But the bottom line is what we'd like to do is take this waste management problem and convert it into a revenue-producing, self-supporting activity that makes the waste management problem go away and contributes to the decarbonization of the wastewater treatment industry. There's a lot of other different check marks there. Okay, a lot of details. If anybody's interested, we can get into that in the discussion. This is how we do it. Looks really complicated. The really simple way of thinking about it is it's a micro scale refinery. In Danbury, everything you see there is contained in a 5,000 square foot building that's on site. Trucks pull up, unload through an industry standard fog receiving system called the Beast. It screens stuff. It goes into some underground concrete decant tanks that form the basement, the lower part of our building. We then bring the brown grease up above, goes through a reactor system, and all those little boxes there are some of the details of what we do. Again, I'm happy to discuss it if people are interested. I don't know how many chemical engineers are in the room, but there's really nobody except chemical engineering types and maybe some really, really exotic plumbers that are interested in this sort of stuff. But anyway, I'm always happy to talk about it if anyone else is interested. The numbers, I've been involved in this for about 14 or 15 years. Eric's been involved in this for 6 or 8 years. Al got involved in this about 5 years ago. Okay, so 14 years developing the IP. We have a couple patents included in the technology. There's about 80,000 wastewater treatment plants worldwide that have this brown grease problem. There's a number of patents that I got through UConn and a new patent that we just filed that'll be independent of UConn because I retired from there a couple of years ago. Right here in the United States, though, there's 7 billion kilograms of brown grease that we can extract from fog that we can convert into biofuel. It's a lot. The current entire biodiesel industry is making about 15 or 16 billion kilograms of biodiesel. We can expand the whole industry by a third or 50%. That's how much brown grease we have here in the United States. We've gotten $1.8 million in government grants to, move the work forward. A couple $1 million in equity capital have been raised into the company to help move the project forward down in Danbury. And then there's some numbers there about how many billions of megajoules of BTUs we can get out of the brown grease versus how many billions of megajoules the waste treatment industry uses. There's enough energy in that brown grease to run the entire wastewater treatment industry. So we have a little trademark called Total Fog Solutions. There were some questions about some rope skimmers and things like that came up that we can address in our discussions. That's part of our Total Fog Solutions. Then lastly, where our technology fits in. Again, it's a little graphic. Basically, right now, fog and brown grease is disposed of by either incinerators, it's very popular here in Connecticut, or by sending it to a biodigester, or in some cases, landfilling it. It's all bad, just to put it bluntly. It costs money, it causes pollution, and it's going to get regulated out. It's going to become impossible to do these things. So we're offering an alternative. That's really what that slide says. For Connecticut, we're thinking more than just single projects. We're talking about a regional approach with a hub and spoke model, where a project at a place like here in Hartford would form a hub. It's the largest wastewater treatment plant in the state. It could be fed by a variety of spokes. Again, the particular type of model that's set up depends on what people want to do here, what we can supply, and things like that. There's just many different possibilities of how to set this up. But we have a plan to basically take all the brown grease in Connecticut and make about 8.5 or 9 million gallons a year of biodiesel. And we've done the studies to show what's available and where it's available and how to set up this hub and spoke model if everybody gets on board with it. So basically, here's a little short summary of what our technology does. There's chemical reactions in it. That's the micro refinery part. There's separations in it, etc. And we come out with crystal clear B100 biodiesel. So this brown grease is a very, very crude biofuel. You could burn it in waste oil boilers, but it does have about 600 or 800 parts per million sulfur in it. Okay, that's one of the things that contributes to the dark color. Okay, when we make the biodiesel, I should have brought a little vial of it. It'll be crystal clear. You could put a piece of paper behind it and read 8-point type through it. Okay, the sulfur will be down below 15 parts per million, which is what's necessary for diesel fuels here in the United States. Here's some details in the packages you have about the demo that we did in New Haven. You know, basically, we made several thousand gallons of biodiesel from their brown grease. We helped them install a belt skimmer to extract the brown grease out of their fog from their decanters. Works awesomely well. And there's a quote there from a report that was generated by Stantec that we commissioned to have them do the final report on it. So it's a third party, unbiased report. They were very enthusiastic about what we did in New Haven. And again, that's part of the reason Danbury wanted us to do this. The picture on the lower left shows that we built our system in New Haven in a couple of 40-foot Connex containers. So it was easy to bring it there. And then when the demo project was done, it was easy to take away. Now, obviously, it didn't have all the equipment that we have in Danbury, okay? Center picture shows me and Governor Malloy, you know, loading some biodiesel into a little tank. You know, normally governors don't come to wastewater treatment plants, but Dan Malloy was interested enough in what we were doing. Rosa DeLauro came also. Big surprise to me, Rosa DeLauro actually worked at the the New Haven wastewater treatment plant before she went into politics. Just little aside, you know. Anyway, Danbury wastewater treatment plant. This is just a schematic. Okay, I'm not going to show it now. You can look at it. We have a little video tour if anybody's interested in seeing it. Okay, so this is where the plant is about 85% built. Let's see if I can click on this YouTuber here. There we go. Paved it. It's all paved now. Trucks Okay, so that's basically our presentation. Let's see, I think I can just, well, I'll leave it.
So I would just like to add a couple things. I think Doc did a nice job going through this quickly. We say 85%. We're on a tight budget. A few months ago, we put this together. We're at 100% now. Our system is built. It's 100% built. We've processed brown grease through the primary, secondary decants to the stage that you see the oil now. When it comes in, you can imagine what it looks like off the trucks that pick up this waste at the restaurants. But we're prepared now to start moving through the system. We estimate it's going to take probably 4 to 6 weeks to get to the B100 biodiesel state at a continuous flow, fully automated system. These films didn't show, this little video didn't show the fully automated system, but Doc has been working with our engineers, CET Engineering, and we have a 100% automated system. So every pump, every valve, every tank gets measured on our computers. We can control it from our iPads or from the computer room that's at the plant. We can control it remotely. We'll always be able to dial into our systems. If there's a problem, we can remotely fix those problems. Mayor Boughton was interested when Antonio Iadarulo, the city engineer, came down to New Haven, and we fueled his truck. Dan Malloy actually put the biodiesel in his truck. It went back to Danbury, and Mayor Boughton said, I like this, let's give it a shot. So they were in the process of a plant overhaul, and Veolia, who manages their plant, had a contract of some $100+ million to renovate certain items of the plant. One of the things that they were going to do was to do fog receiving, because DEEP had mandated that they increase their fog receiving at that plant to 18,000 gallons a day. They were going to take and decant it. So basically the whole front end of our system is what they were going to do, but then they were going to send it to the biodigester and burn it. Doc talked a little bit about the hub and spoke. DEEP hired Wright Pierce in 2011 to measure how much brown grease was out there in the state and where it was. So there's 110 waste treatment plants in the state. They all have grease. They all basically handle it the same way. Some of them can, incinerate it. Some of them have to truck it. But the majority of this brown grease in this state is trucked by companies like Synagro and private haulers. We're finding in Danbury that they should have built the system a whole lot bigger, because they're waiting in line to get rid of this grease. New Haven now is broken down, and they're bringing some of their grease here, I believe, but they want to bring grease to us in Danbury. Torrington brings it to Waterbury, and then Waterbury brings it to New Haven or where else. Torrington wants to bring it to us. So the demand to get rid of this grease is just growing every day, and the problem is growing every day. We think we have a solution. DEEP, when they commissioned Wright Pierce, felt that they would set up a hub and spoke, basically truck all this grease to 4 locations. We agree with those locations. Hartford, one of the largest areas, Danbury, New Haven, and New London are the areas that we would want to build our system. So that's our Connecticut business plan that's in your package, and it's supported by DEEP. They like the idea that we're not going to incinerate it, that we're going to make a biodiesel out of it. So we didn't actually develop the hub and spoke. Wright Pierce did that, commissioned by DEEP. DEEP has watched everything we've done. They've given us authorization in New Haven to do this under their permit. We went to DEEP for air permits and waste permits for Danbury. After we spent tens of thousands of dollars, they came to the conclusion that we fit under their current air permits and waste permits, so we don't need separate permits to do this at a waste treatment plant. We have looked at doing it at a private site in New Haven. I think that'll add a little complication with DEEP because it isn't a waste treatment plant, and getting rid of the water is something we'd have to consider, and maybe we need a special air permit if we weren't at a waste treatment plant. but we think we fit with all the EPA and deep regulations. That being said, I don't know if there's anything Eric or Doc want to add to that.
Let's see if you folks have any questions that you'd like us to zero in on.
We want to go through the chair.
Okay.
David, go ahead.
Hartford plant, there's 4 you're looking at. What are the volumes you're looking at? Is that the 8.5 million volumes?
At Hartford?
If you did this 4 plants in Connecticut, what are we? 8.5 million, or is that the whole state?
No, that'd be the whole state. That wouldn't be.
What are we then?
Well, it's a,
I mean, obviously, yeah, again, if someone talked about 4, I would think you'd have, have some type of idea.
Our data says that the Hartford area, the MDC area, could support a plant making 5 million gallons a year of biodiesel. Okay.
Making 5 million.
Yeah.
And so,
Require bringing fog in, an extensive,
I understand, but
yes.
so we would make 5 million gallons you produce, and at 0.75, we'd need bring in 7 or something like that. You'd haul in 7 of stuff. And is that, as far as you can see, that's available to us? I'm not saying relatively easy.
Yeah. Because Karina did. We had a civil engineering person who's familiar with the waste treatment industry kind of assess how much fog and brown grease each area produces. Okay, you can then also reconcile that with like national averages on a per person basis. And it's all pretty consistent.
So, can I ask again?
You want to keep going?
All right, what's your plan, Danbury, which is your biggest? You could scale it up, right? You're not designed to one size, right? Like some of these, okay.
Correct. Technology is all very scalable.
If you take a look when you have time in the Connecticut business plan, we show the economics for a 250,000 gallon system, a 1 million gallon system, a 2.5 million gallon system, and a 5 million gallon system. So those 4 sizes.
We want to be, if it makes sense, to fill a $5 million solution, right? I mean, that's the big one.
economics.
The economics
Economies
make-
of scale,
right.
definitely.
Yeah, I'm just getting, I'm trying to understand it's a business.
Who was next? Al, you had your.
Can I answer one of my questions? Go ahead.
Go ahead. Yes.
Thank you, thanks, Chairman. How, you said you go through that rope system or something. I think staff had informed us that we weren't able to extract from our pipes with the rope system. Can you explain how that would work with us?
It's used in different applications in our process. So this one was used, I think, at fish fry at one of your wet wells, pump stations there. And, we were involved in the beginning. We introduced oil skimmer to the MDC. At a certain point, I think we weren't on your vendor list, so we were replaced by another company to come in to finish the project. So I didn't know much information after it was ordered and installed, but from the photos, I spoke with Lindsay, one of your engineers, and I also spoke with Oil Skimmer too. I guess an issue was you had a broken rope once. Oil Skimmer rope broke, and they said, from my explanation from Oil Skimmer, said it looks like it was shredded. I don't know if it got caught in one of the pumps. That was an issue. I also saw photos of, I don't think the issue was it picking up the grease. I think the issue is what it looked like. It got restricted up in the unit and basically got clogged, and all the material started falling back out. So I spoke with Oil Skimmer about it, and they're on board to remedy the situation, rectify it, to get it to work. Picking up the grease, I don't think is a problem. I think there was a flow issue there. It was constricted where it was dumping into the hopper, where it flowed into the tank. And from what it looks like, there was a clog and it just built up and didn't flow properly into the tank. But they're on board to resolve the situation. We're currently running 2 skimmers in Danbury right now. They're working fine.
In New Haven.
We ran in New Haven also, but the ones we're currently running 2 right now. So, and that's not something we would use in every application.
It's small.
But, guys, one at a time. David. Go ahead.
Could you expound on that a little bit? Because staff was saying they didn't have that level of cooperation that you believe that we should be getting.
Well, I would tell you that initially when we started bringing information to the MDC. We were working with UConn and UConn students to get involved with the restaurants, and we knew that we were going to be presenting at some point, and I'm sorry.
Thank you.
We just wanted to be careful that we didn't have any conflicts and stuff, so it was recommended that we don't get involved with things at the MDC till we get through this process. So we kind of stepped back because we didn't want to overstep our boundaries. But Eric is is an operating engineer, and we're very much willing to get involved and help rectify that situation with that belt skimmer, because we introduced it and we would like to see that through. But
Bottom line was, since we couldn't participate in the implementation of the project, we weren't there, to provide the guidance that I think would have resulted in given a successful result. Because the thing is, the skimmer was picking up huge amounts of material, but it wasn't able to handle that material. It needed a bigger chute, it needed a bigger whatever, it needed more heat. But we weren't there, we couldn't be involved. So, it's hard to say how it would have gone if we had been able to be more closely
And listen,
involved.
the oil skimmer is one application we use to pick up grease. Obviously, it's limited the amount of grease it can pick up, but in that application, oil skimmer is ready to get involved. We're ready to get involved to figure out the solution. It's worked well in every application that we've used it. So I think that this material obviously is relatively thick, and with the solids included in it, if it doesn't flow properly, it's like the grease is like the mortar, and all the solids, the hair and all the solids are like the aggregate, and it just gets compacted, and it just didn't flow into the holding tank. So I just need to know more. I didn't really get to speak with any engineers about it, why it failed. I spoke to the oil skim the other day, and they said, they wanted to get involved. They just haven't heard lately from the MDC, but we want to rectify it. Maybe doing a shorter rope, trying something a little different.
So one more question, Mr. Chairman, if I may. So if you were chosen to implement this, you would have, your design would be, part of that would obviously be taking care of this issue. And what percentage do you believe of what you would in the end up skim off a system or get from trucks or whatever would come from the plant itself versus being trucked in?
Well, there's the industry standards and amount of grease in every gallon of wastewater that comes in. And obviously we'd have to do some sampling and to figure that out. But we anticipated that coming in through the headworks to the plant, it's probably like 1.8 million gallons a year of grease. But obviously you have to get it out and extract it out of that fraction. So that's something that we would like to take samples and analyze it and see what we can actually get as a feasible yield.
Right. So that's why in our responses we said that a brown greased biodiesel plant here at the MDC, we can imagine building a plant as small as, say, 2 million gallons a year just to handle the grease that we'd extract from the influent to the plant. If you didn't want to receive fog or take any material from outside the plant, we could build a plant just to handle the influent. Okay, but you can make more money if you build a bigger plant.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you, Chairman. Bud, Commissioner Salemi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my question is really for, Dr. Parnson, maybe you can answer it first, and then I'm sure that Al can get it. But, the state of Connecticut, you're very familiar with, state of Connecticut's building code requires any place that produces food products, restaurants, cafeterias, even butcher shops and places like that have to have a grease trap. And then since the fog regulations were adopted, these have become more complicated than they used to be. And I know from some of the big schools that we built, the tech high schools and everything, the grease trap itself is a huge tank underneath the cafeteria or out in the parking lot or someplace, So there's a basic difference though between that's yellow fog, basically. The stuff that comes from restaurants and from food products is yellow fog. And the brown fog is the stuff that comes from the waste stream, the typical waste stream that heads towards a sewage treatment plant. So the grease traps are there to try to get this out of it before it gets into the waste stream. And that's what causes the problems like at fish fries. There's too much grease getting into the waste stream that's supposed to be removed before it gets there. So my question is, the process for producing biodiesel, is it different for the yellow fog and for brown fog that's developed? And my understanding from reading all of your materials and also reading about this, in the industry standards and so forth, is that the yellow fog is easier to deal with, and but I don't know if it has to go through the same decanting process that the rest of it does. And are you proposing to process yellow fog as well through your system as brown fog? That's the question.
You've asked a lot of questions, so
I thought it was just one, but go ahead.
so it's got a lot of nuances. But to back up, I like to use the word fog, fats, oils, and grease, to describe trap waste that you pump out of a big grease trap. And fog is actually mostly water. It typically only has somewhere between 2, 3, 4% grease in it. So when we talk about yellow versus brown, I think in terms of what's called yellow grease and brown grease. Brown grease we extract from fog, okay? So I know this just sounds like semantics, but it allows us to have kind of a common language to talk about this stuff. Yellow grease is like used cooking oil. You've been running your fryolators for a couple days in the restaurant, right? And now it's time to empty them so that you don't get a health code violation, right? And so you empty your fryolator, and if you empty your fryolator into a dedicated used cooking oil container, and it doesn't sit there for months, it gets picked up at the end of the week, that's yellow grease, okay? It's a high-quality waste oil. If instead you're washing your grease down the drain and it gets trapped in a grease trap out in the parking lot, and then it sits there for however long before a hauler comes and pumps it out, and while it's sitting there, it's in contact with a lot of water, a lot of detergents, a lot of this, a lot of that, and it gets contaminated with all sorts of stuff. That's what we call brown grease. On a chemical basis, if you start with vegetable oils that we're going to cook with, those are called triglyceride molecules, okay? When you cook in your fryolator, that material degrades a little bit, and a good restaurant that changes their cooking oil every couple days, when they pour out their used cooking oil as yellow grease, it's going to be mostly triglycerides and maybe 2, 3, 4% free fatty acids. Free fatty acids are the degradation product, okay? If it goes and sits in a grease trap for 3 months before it gets pumped out, it degrades a lot further. And the material, the brown grease, ends up being 50%, 75%, 95% free fatty acids. And that has an impact on how we process stuff. So virgin vegetable oils are really easy to make into biodiesel. Single reactor, you don't have to take sulfur out of it, you don't have to decant it, you just bang, done, okay? Yellow grease is pretty easy, but you got to do a little pre-treatment step on it. Brown grease is a pain in the neck. Now what we've set up is a system that can do brown grease, and because it can do brown grease up to 100% free fatty acids, it's also set up to handle any fraction between brown grease, yellow grease, and virgin oils. So we're what we call a multi-feedstock facility.
We call those we're set up for opportunity feedstocks. Obviously, we're designed for the brown, but if there's any other available feedstocks around, we can take them.
So in Danbury, we're in a situation where there's that movie where they said, if you build it, they will come. We have restaurants down in Danbury now saying, our haulers are a pain. Can we just drop our yellow grease off at your place? We say, sure, yeah.
I would have answered your question, no, Bud. No, they're not the same, yellow and brown, but our system allows us to be able to do both. In their experience, Doc started in 2007. He actually built a reactor at UConn one of our videos on our webpage shows us fueling school buses at Yukon. He made biodiesel. He'd take a 5-gallon bucket, stop a bus, and dump it into their tank. It can go in at any percentage. You start adding it slowly, and you could eventually put all biodiesel in if you wanted to, but he actually did that. Eric went with Doc to France and actually made biodiesel from canola oil and animal fat and other products. So we have a vast experience within our group of making biodiesel from any of these products. But if you were to go and try to research biodiesel, across the world, Doc Parnas comes up as one of the experts in that field. So you're asking the right man the questions.
Thank you.
This is fun.
I have one other question to go with it, Mr. Chairman, if that's okay. So, and it appears that Connecticut's DEEP, the Department of Environmental Protection, has looked pretty far down the road with respect to how to treat this in the future. That, typically, not only in the recent past, but in the distant past, this was just sent to a sewage treatment plant. And I know you said one of the methods for disposal was burying it in a landfill, which I think is prohibited now, or it's about to be prohibited, for that.
Yeah, it is now, yeah.
And the other thing where I think that they've looked down the road is the legislation that was passed with respect to, using biodiesel in Connecticut, not just producing it. I believe in 2022 said that 5% of home heating oil. Is it limited? That's my question. Is it limited to home heating oil, or is this also for, diesel fuel? But my understanding was home heating oil has to be blended now with 5% biodiesel. The way when you pull up to a gas station, you read a little thing on the pump says, 10% ethanol. It can be up to 10% ethanol for the same reasons. It's an environmental. It's basically to respond to cleaning up the air. My understanding. That legislation also says in 2025 it's going to be 20%. So the state's going to have a source for biodiesel, and so I think that's my understanding is that's why DEEP has looked forward with this and had Wright Pierce look at how much is available in Connecticut and so forth. So the legislation is based on their understanding of what's going to be available. Is that correct? And am I correct about the other forms of disposal becoming prohibited at some point in the future?
Yes, and Danbury was taking their grease and mixing it by hand, if you can imagine, with wood chips. And they'd have to put 51% wood chips, and the rest of it could be grease to drop it into their own landfill. That's outlawed now. They're not going to be able to bring it to the landfill anymore. That's why they were looking at, can they bring it to the biodigester? Doc can get more technical on the biodigester, but the simple explanation is the biodigester doesn't need all that grease. It heats up too much and causes issues. If you take the yellow grease and you get the glycerin out of the yellow grease, the glycerin is actually a good additive to bring to the biodigester. If you want to pursue those questions with Doc, I'm sure he can be a little more explicit with it.
I'm more interested in
You're right.
when it becomes biodiesel.
Statements are right.
The state appears to believe that that's the best way to dispose of it is as biodiesel and to blend it with home heating oil and to I don't know if it obviously it can get used in vehicles too. But it has to be
diesel.
Out in the Midwest, where the bulk of the biodiesel industry exists, there are truck stops. You can drive up, and a trucker can just dial in whether they want 1% biodiesel in their diesel up to 99% biodiesel. It depends on the company policy. Okay, unlike ethanol, biodiesel is a much better fuel than ethanol. With ethanol, if you have a standard gasoline engine and you put more than about 10 or 15% ethanol in, you're in real danger of getting a vapor lock, right? If you buy a special flex fuel vehicle, yeah, you can put more ethanol in. With biodiesel and petroleum diesel, you can basically blend it at any ratio you want. And there's no vapor lock problem. You don't lose power. Ethanol has 70% of the energy that gasoline has, right? More ethanol, less mileage. Biodiesel has 95% of the energy that petrodiesel has. You can't even tell the difference. Okay, here in Connecticut, biodiesel's not so common, so the truck stops aren't set up to do that. But there are truck stops here in Connecticut that are starting to take biodiesel blends. There are blending facilities. Okay, so, put in 5, 10, 20%. Nobody even knows the difference. It just acts the same. In fact, it adds lubricity to the engine.
Well, and the point of my question is that it looks like the state believes that this is, if not the best, but at least a good way to dispose of fog by turning into biodiesel. And then they more or less believe that there is a market for it, and they've helped promote a market for it by requiring that at least home heating oil have 20% biodiesel in it. That was my point. So thank you. Thank you, Mr.
We have 10 years of historical data on biodiesel pricing. It's always the most in-demand fuel. Okay.
Thank you.
Jim Johnson. Mr. Chairman, you had your hand.
Gary Johnson, and Commissioner, I'm not on this committee, but I'm a commissioner. For the record, I'm retired from DEP, and you did a presentation many years ago before me, but we set those programs up before Wright Pierce did, with the 4 facilities to take them. And the intention was because we were going to incinerate. That was the best alternative at the time. My questions to you, and where my concern comes in, the industry is making a huge shift now from transesterification to renewable diesel, which is basically a refining process, which I'm sure you as a chemical engineer are well aware of it. Biodiesel traditional plants are closing down around the country while these big giant plants are coming. The industry is switching to that product, which according to the literature is far superior to the biodiesel generated through transesterification because it's stable, can be used at 100%. In your answer, where you answered to the question, you said, well, for maybe a couple of years, we could compete. But at one point, these things are designed for probably a 20-year, 25-year life. That industry may switch. It may make a paradigm switch. So your product, you'd have a system that might be obsolete. That's my first question.
Your questions were excellent because they showed up in several of the different questions, and I tried to answer them. There's 3 parts to the answer. One is that the literature put out by the oil industry isn't going to tell you this, but they're going to run into the same problem that the ethanol industry did with food fuel competition. Because the way that you make renewable diesel is you use vegetable triglyceride oils. We've had conversations with oil majors, and I mean some of the really, really big companies, as to whether they could use brown grease to make renewable diesel. And they can't. It's got too much sulfur and too much free fatty acids. Somewhere on my computer, I actually have a spec sheet from a refinery that says if they're going to take a vegetable type oil into their refinery to make renewable diesel, it's got to have less than 20% free fatty acid. That's yellow grease. That's not brown grease, right? And it's got to have less than 40 parts per million sulfur. Okay, they can't do it. They talked with us about running our process to upgrade brown grease to make feedstock for them. And they were willing to pay us for it. But we said, if we're going to run our process, why not just actually run it all the way through to make biodiesel and make 3 times what they were going to pay us, right? Okay, so that's one part of the answer. They're going to get into the food fuel competition that basically put a lid on what the ethanol industry in the United States can do. Okay, so the second part of the answer is what I just alluded to, is that now the oil industry has a lot more clout, political clout, than the ethanol industry does. So they might push this through. There's a big oil company that's taking 10 million acres of soybean agricultural land out of food production to make feedstock for renewable diesel. Okay? When soybean prices go through the roof, like corn prices did a number of years ago, there's going to be pushback. Okay? Now, what's going to happen to us? What's going to happen if we build a plant to make biodiesel? There's 2 things that can happen. One, if the legislation doesn't prohibit biodiesel, biodiesel is infinitely blendable with renewable diesel, just like it's infinitely blendable with petrodiesel. So as long as the regulations don't say you can't use biodiesel, we're good. Okay? And when the oil industry literature says that biodiesel properties are horrible, that's wrong. Okay? There's additives that have been used now for 20 years to remedy, to handle the cold weather properties of biodiesel. There's standard antioxidation additives that are already added to petroleum diesel that work with biodiesel as well. So the properties of biodiesel are really quite good. One could argue that, maybe in the winter you shouldn't use 100% biodiesel, but for the next 30 years, there's a clear runway for both biodiesel and renewable diesel to come into the marketplace. Okay, and thirdly, the third part of the answer is that, hey, if necessary, we can take our biodiesel and upgrade it to renewable diesel. I have a patent on that, actually.
May I follow up?
Sure.
I'm more concerned, I don't doubt that your process works and there'll be a market for it, but if the price drops on the renewable, your price drops. So that the economics of your analysis has to take that into consideration. And secondly, if you do switch your process to a renewable refined process, what would be the cost and who would be responsible for it? And I don't want to take too much more of the time. My last question is, in my discussion with my good friends in New Haven, they aren't going forward with your project. They like the student work, but they're not doing it. Is there a reason in particular why they wouldn't want to go forward with a project like Danbury?
So, first question is on the economics.
Yes.
So, oil is whatever it is now, whether it's $75 or $100 a barrel or whatever, it's a couple bucks a gallon.
Yep.
The companies we talked about, when they want to take vegetable oils off the farm, you're talking $2.80 a gallon. So you're instantly over $100 a barrel feedstock cost. So renewable diesel is not going to get cheaper. It's going to get cheaper to what it is now, because right now it's more like an R&D project. Okay, it's going to come down to be kind of like the same range as petrodiesel and biodiesel. Okay, it's not going economically. It's not going to cut the guts out of biodiesel. They can't get their feedstock for less than $100 a barrel. And now it goes into a refinery, and you have standard refinery costs and things like that, including high pressure hydrogen, which is expensive because it gets hydro-treated. That's the technical name of the process in the refinery that makes renewable diesel. Okay, so I don't believe the economics are going to disappear. Okay, just because there's a floor on the feedstock cost. Okay, in fact, their feedstocks can get more expensive as you get into this food fuel competition. The exact same thing is going to happen with vegetable oil that happened with corn a number of years ago.
Right.
As the fuel industry started demanding this feedstock, there was a period, I think, in the 1990s where a bushel of corn quadrupled in price in the space of, I think, 2 or 3 years. Okay, and you actually had formal protests by the Mexican government to the United States on, because corn is an international commodity, just like oil is. Okay. Anyway, so that was one of your questions on the economics, and then
David, question why they ultimately chose not to move forward.
Yeah, I'd like to respond to that. So Gabe Vark is the finance director. We're very close. We have meetings with them very regularly. They're shut down right now and they're redoing their front end. What he would like to do, because his plant is really landlocked, they just bought additional land just to have another entrance to their plant. So they have no place to put our plant. What they were hoping was that we were going to build a plant very close. We call the area Dragon Point. It's right at the mouth of the Quinnipiac River where our offices are. And we looked at doing a private site for financial reasons first. Owning our own plant is something that we really would like to be able to do. We've met with Morgan Stanley and how we would finance all of our projects, and that one in particular, Gabe and his people, Gary, who were all just at our plant for, I don't know how many times they've been up there, but they were up there last week because they like our front end fog receiving. So we've had conversations with them. What they would like to be able to do is let Synagro truck their grease to our private plant if we decide to build that plant, because he doesn't have enough property to do it, even if he wanted to do it. They would have to find a way to buy it, and he's surrounded by oil tanks and everything, so he really can't fit it on his plant. But they're very cooperative. They're working with us. They're excited what we're doing, and we're going to help them with their front end issue now with the beast. So I wouldn't say it's a no. Gabe said whatever we have in Greece, we'll send over to you and you can process it. We'll make some sort of financial agreement, but I think it's because they don't have a place to put it. They really couldn't fit it there.
And you do know there's a biodiesel plant
Yeah.
300 yards off the site.
Intimately know Colmar and Green Fuels and everything they do. They make about 40 million gallons a year. They ship it all over the place, but they're mixing it in home heating fuel too.
Or triglycerides.
We know them intimately.
They don't do brown.
run yellow
They don't
grease and
do
palm
brown.
oil.
They just do yellow.
Yeah, they do yellow grease and palm oil from Indonesia.
There was just a tanker there yesterday from Indonesia bringing in palm oil. They buy their oil from across the world.
David, did you have a question?
The 5 million gallons a year or the 7,500 we bring in, does that include the yellow from restaurants or just the stuff from waste treatment plants? And I guess my second question, do we want that business, the yellow? I mean, there's so many people doing that. That's not something that we would be interested in. 'Cause I don't want to put a lot of people out of business. I'm just curious why we go after that.
You want to depend on it.
No, we don't want it to depend on it. Obviously, we've done some, we've brought in engineers to figure out what's available. And obviously, there's an amount that's there. It's just a matter of, can we get our hands on all of it?
I mean, I interrupted you, but
I think I've estimated between 2.5 and 5 million, depending on availability of the grease, what we can get in. So that's something we would like to do, is take it to the next level to see really what's there and can we get our hands on that grease? And is it a way of supplementing the yellow too? A lot of the restaurants down in the Danbury area basically aren't getting anything for their used cooking oil. They're just bringing it outside. So we're working on some sort of arrangement with working with the restaurants that we give them a reduced tipping fee for bringing their trap grease in, that they would supply us with their used cooking oil also. So the more we get, it's easier to process.
it's just again, I can't picture the whole thing. So you're going to have guys coming with like station wagons with 50 gallons of cans of oil from their pizza place and dump it in Hartford. I'm just.
We would have to come through private haulers.
Or private haulers.
Power the sheer way into a big private hall and okay. I'm
You
just-
do it the right way, obviously. Yeah, you wouldn't have it. Yeah,
So you want to go after yellow if it's available. It just seems like
available. Yes, and if the economics make sense, why not? But we're relying on the brown. If we could supplement it with some yellow, that would be great.
Our unique proposition is that we can handle the brown grease.
right. And I understand, and which is what you want because that's where your niche is.
If you want to give us the yellow too, we'll take it.
Let me ask another. One of these meetings we were talking about this rope skipper, and I'm just. If you get to 5 million, I don't even know why you use a rope skipper. It's just if you get to that's like 4,000 an hour.
Well, we wouldn't be using a rope skimmer.
You use it. Why don't you just get an oil separator, which people use instead of? I mean, it's just
Well, that's what we
the whole
would.
thing. Conversation was listened to, but in another meeting, it just seemed insane to me. That was.
We wouldn't use a rope skimmer. Yeah, we wouldn't use a rope skimmer. And
That's
then
a good answer. If you said you're going to go multiple rope skippers,
No,
you would say,
no, we
this is
wouldn't.
the best I've heard in my life.
If we supply, there are questions asked how we would use a rope skipper.
It's a rope skipper.
Pull out.
we wouldn't do
That's
that.
something that's in the backyard. A rope
No,
skipper.
no.
Part of what we want to provide, we want to be partners with the MDC. You have a fog problem,
I got it.
we have solutions. It isn't just our system. There's other things we want to do to be a total fog solution for the MDC. So we would do that in conjunction with Chris Levesque and all of his people to solve each of these problems. That's a problem. Your pump stations are having problems. You have other locations where you spend hundreds of thousands of dollars cleaning them. We would like to help find solutions to those fog problems.
Let me just one last question to be done. I mean, I can see how this could work for us, but again, and what you have is good. Why don't you just do it yourself? Like New Haven said, why don't you just do it yourself? Get a whole bunch of money for. I mean, you're gonna make money.
Yeah, well, we guys have the grease. We like the grease.
I understand. You just collect it from everybody. Just do it yourself and don't bother with. But anyways,
Well, we want the brown grease. You guys have the market on the brown grease.
Right, and not only that, one of the issues we would have doing it on a private site is the discharge of the water that we decant and everything. So
you have to get rid of it too. So you got the same problem.
They'd have to have additional regulations on where it would go.
You need us.
it's
In the
complicated.
end, you need us anyway. So
I assume for discussion purposes here that your business models and the proposed business models that you offer here are predicated on exclusively on brown grease. Anything that comes above that could be gravy, but it's not the thing that you're depending on.
But the 5 million gallons, you think if you took the yellow away, it'd be something less than 5 million gallons, you think? I know you're guessing, but it's an important number.
It depends on what other regional facilities are bringing in the amount of water, we gotta calculate that, obviously you guys don't wanna bring in too much more wastewater too, right? That affects your process, so we
It
like
just
to bring.
seems to me though, if we were gonna do this, it's the cheapest to do the biggest we can, as long as.
Right, the economics make much more sense, yes.
The vast majority of what you're delivering is gonna be,
Grease.
fake, and it's gonna be processed, dewatered before someone puts it in. the
Correct, yeah. If we're bringing in from another wastewater treatment plant, we don't wanna bring water in, we wanna bring as much of raw grease as possible, so at another
plant.
plant.
Too, because it's transporting.
Right.
That's happening with New Haven right now, right?
Yeah, obviously when you decant this material too much, you get rid of the water, then you have a heating problem, and you have to have heated trucks, and well, we know all those scenarios that we discussed, so.
Commissioner Taylor.
Yeah, I guess one of my questions for you, where does your process stand in an evolutionary sense in terms of biodiesel? There are other methods that were around for producing it, and I would take it that yours is much more efficient. In terms of, would you lay it out in terms of the technical aspects and then the economic aspects?
And what I would tell you is that the biodiesel plant in New Haven has 100 workers in that plant. It's a batch system. It's not fully automated. Our system and the economics of our system work because it's fully automated. We don't expect to have in Danbury more than 4 people run that system because it's fully automated. When we go up to 1 million and 2.5 million, we'll need more people, but not in a batch system like New Haven where they need 100 people to run that plant. So the cost to build a plant increases, but the cost to operate that plant isn't proportionally increased like the cost of building it. That's why
Our labor costs.
our labor costs are very, very low.
Well, it's the DOCS technology, it's that we don't have a batch process, most biodiesel technologies are batch processes, we do a continuous system, so we can do more on a smaller footprint and less labor, but we have more automation, so.
And, like I mentioned before, there isn't anyone else that can do 100% brown grease. So if you Colmar, with their 40 million gallon a year plant, they could mix in 1 or 2% brown grease, and then you don't even notice it. If they had 10% brown grease in their feedstock, their plant would come to a screeching halt. So that's what we bring to the table is.
We have no competition with brown grease. And it's a problem for the waste treatment plant. So we don't want to ever lose focus on this is solving a problem for the waste treatment plant, and it's profitable. There's not very many things you can say that about at a waste treatment plant.
And the yellow's just, as we've indicated, as discussed here, that's just gravy.
Gravy, yeah.
Right. You run that through your system.
Right.
Correct.
That's icing on the cake. Just a question. I see the payouts. The payouts are 5 years, 3 years. Is that the capital cost versus the operating costs?
Yes, so what we try to do in a simple spreadsheet, and there's large spreadsheets that back up all of these numbers, was show how profitable this is without any federal assistance. Right now, the federal government gives you $1 for manufacturing, $1 when you mix, a blender's credit, and then they give you RINs that are somewhere in the $2, $2.50 range. And depending on how the financial deal is put together and whether or not those federal grants are applicable to a municipality is a discussion we've had with many, many lawyers. And we believe that in a public-private partnership, a PPP arrangement, those federal monies would be available. So what we're looking for here is to build a relationship and answer a lot of these questions professionally. And we know you have great lawyers working for you, and we have lawyers that we spent a lot of money on answering some of these questions. They aren't yes or no answers. There's things that need to be worked out and need to be discussed for us to go together to get those federal grants. Because when you add those federal grants in, the numbers become unbelievable. So it's coming upon us to find a way to get to that money also, and we'd be part of that.
Well, disruption assessment also is significant today, and try to anticipate with data and all the other things that have come together. Disruption is a significant possibility, as Commissioner Johnson points out in his representation. And to have different capacities to deal with that is significant too. Because disruption's taken out some of the greatest corporations in the history of the United States. I'm talking about technology disruption. And that's pretty difficult to anticipate, especially at the speed of what we're moving in digital world and everything else. So those are assessments you look at doing it. But in our case, it's a situation that exists within an existing treatment facility. And that, not to say that there can't be disruptions and won't be disruptions in those, but the shorter the payout periods are, the better off you are in dealing with those issues.
What's interesting, if you look at and ask artificial intelligence, AI, about brown grease, they refer to Doc Parnas. So
Also, to put numbers on the value, just recently, biodiesel is selling for like, what, I think it was $4.85 a gallon. Then you add the $1 a gallon producer's credit, the $1 a gallon blender's credit, and $2 or more for RINs.
$9.25.
Right,
And then there's the whole carbon credit thing, which we don't know
Right,
much about,
right.
but we
So
know that's a whole other market.
today,
so.
the actual value of a gallon of biodiesel is up close to $9 a gallon. Now, that doesn't mean any one player is going to get all that $9, right? So, for example, if we set up a private location, we were making biodiesel, we could sell it and we could get the producer's credit, right? We sell it to a home heating oil company that then blends it. They'll get the $1 a gallon blender's credit. And then, okay, who gets the RINs? Okay, that has to be negotiated as to, there's complicated legal frameworks for that, but the RINs can get divided up between who gets which part of them, right? And then finally, I'm working on a project out in Washington State where we're talking about taking canola oil with farmers out there that want to farm 500,000 acres of canola to make it into biodiesel. And we're putting together a piece of software that will actually compute their carbon credits that the farmer as the end user can pick up.
Right.
Okay? So there's a lot of value to this that can get spread around to the different players. Your point about disruption, of course, is very good. It's really hard to predict the future. So,
And AI and all these things are going to shorten a lot of things down. But when you start to look at the environmental issues and how it's accelerated relative to what the anticipated is. I mean, looking the other day at news, and the water temperature in Miami, Florida is 98 degrees.
Right.
You know what that does to hurricanes?
It intensifies hurricanes and kills the coral reefs.
To insurance. That's why we've seen another major insurer leave the Florida market. You're not going to be able to buy insurance in Florida. And it's going to become so significantly difficult that the state's not going to be a significant player in trying to stabilize or to stabilize that issue. And it's just moving so rapidly, it's scary. So everything we look at as a standard today that is acceptable is going to be divided in half and in half if we're going to be competitive, or not competitive, deal with the problem of real environmental.
On the environmental stuff, maybe you folks have seen these numbers, but the Department of Energy says that biodiesel made from soybeans has 74% less carbon impact than petroleum diesel. Biodiesel made from brown grease is going to be even lower carbon impact because you don't have the carbon impact of growing the soybeans in the first place. We're taking a true waste product, right? On that same website, they say that the reduction in carbon footprint of renewable diesel is about 65%. So biodiesel is actually, as far as carbon footprint, better than renewable diesel. So those are actual numbers that I'm not.
That's why we thought that it makes some sense as we're dealing with the whole climate change relative to stormwater that we're experienced that we never thought we'd experience 5 years ago. We didn't think that we'd see this acceleration. All of this is got to be looked at. I mean, our air quality, we're looking at numbers now that are going to be totally unacceptable in 5 years. And we're struggling to get to where they are now. So if there's not a technology approach to this, that we're all going to be in enormous problems. That's what we're trying to do, is be anticipatory to what's around us. And it's more significant every day, and the period becomes shorter.
Question.
David?
I'm just trying to envision how this would work, assuming we kind of go with this, and I'm just speaking for me. The trucking will be done by other people, as far as you can tell. Wouldn't it be part of us? Some will do, and we make them, there'll be contracts, they drop it off. Now, will we build this and you own it, or you sell this to us and maybe operate or sell it to us and be done with it, and we call you if we have a problem? Is that how you envision the business?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's lots of opportunities. We can basically design it, build it, install it, operate it, and finance it. We've met with Morgan Stanley to talk to them about a public-private partnership and what that would mean. Then we brought that to the lawyers to take a look at, to see if there's a way within a public-private partnership that we could go after all of that federal money. I can't tell you I have a definitive answers on all that.
I'm just trying to get where your head's around. So you're an equipment builder, really. That's what you want to do.
Well, we really don't even want to build the equipment. I mean, this is a union shop. It would have to be built by union contractors. We're 100% behind that. We use union contractors in Danbury.
Would that be the case? You wouldn't build it off site and bring it in here and install it?
Well, what happens is that the skids and the equipment get built off site and then get trucked here and put in. But the balance of the plant, do you have fog receiving? Yes. Can we expand that fog receiving? And that would be done on site. So we would need to bring in engineers. We like Wright Pierce because we're working with them in Danbury and they know the balance of the plant. We would have to bring them in and say, where would you put this? How would you connect this? We basically are responsible for a box. Inside that box is everything you need to do to take brown grease and make B100 biodiesel.
Around the box.
How it all connects. The building can only be so high because the airport's still here, and so you can only go so. You got to deal with all of that.
Build around the box, and you want to go. And again, that's fine.
It would be a partnership, is what I would say. We would have to figure all of that out legally, how that is, but we're prepared to work any one of those arrangements.
Let me ask one last question again. I'm not worried about the box. I'm worried about the whole thing around it. It seems to be you're in the $2.5 to $5 million range. And I'm kind of thinking, million. That means gallons per year. If we said let's go the next step, wouldn't be pinning that down be the next step or not?
Yes.
There's a whole design exercise.
No, I understand. I'm just trying to think of the picture.
We need to know the volume.
Next week we said we all like this. I'm just speaking, where do we go next? I think that would need, okay.
Location and volume is what's important for us to do everything else we need to do to put the package together.
You do the box, you do the box, and we would take care of with our group or whatever, everything around it in our.
Yes.
And there'd have to be a lot of collaboration to make sure.
I understand.
That's how it's done in Danbury right now. That's what our agreement was with Danbury. They brought the electricity. We told them we needed 800 amps. They brought us the power to the building.
Again, that's kind of
how we connect to our wastewater from our building. Yeah, we need to work all that out. Your engineers would work with us to do that. We'd have to make all that work.
Would be our engineers or outside engineers?
I would say, those are your decisions.
We'd assemble a team and go through a preliminary design exercise that would really outline the project. Some people call it like a 30% design level, right? And if it makes sense at that point, the next step is you go to the detailed design where you actually go to P&IDs and.
I understand, but you need a contract to start that. That'd be part of the whole thing.
Yes.
But all this can be done, enough to do all this ahead of time. So if we have all the numbers. I mean, that 30% we would if we committed 30%, we'd want to be fully in, not like at the end. We got to know.
It's still a decision point. You know, if you do a 30% design because of some unanticipated surprise comes up, you know, you don't commit the entire project budget, right? You commit to this 30% design phase, and if that's successful, then you go to the next stage.
Really? That's how you do it.
Yes.
Not a commitment for the whole thing.
If you guys would make 100% commitment ahead of time.
Yeah, we don't expect that.
You shouldn't.
I don't know. I'll be honest with you. If we spent 30% at the end, said this is no good, I think that'd be
Just-
Well, not 30% of the
No,
project.
not the
30%
project, just the
engineering.
design, just the
30%
engineering that,
design, not 30%
you ask
project.
great questions, who does this, who hooks up here, who figures that out? We need to do a design based on the size of the system and where the system's gonna be, and we need to answer those questions. You know, do you have the capacity? Do you need to increase your fog receiving? Is there something we need to do with the air permits or with the water permits? We need to answer all of that. We can do that.
You wouldn't do that as free as part of your sales effort? I'm just seriously. No, that wouldn't be right.
We were Veolia managing 15,000 waste treatment plants around the world. We could probably do a lot of upfront stuff.
We're right next door. This is the one you want.
I think we can go after state and federal grants to help fund some of that design money is what I'm hoping. And if we're going together to do that to DEEP, I think we'll get support. So we need to go after some of that money up front to help us get these questions answered.
The 30% design exercise typically costs kind of 2 to 5% of the total project budget. Okay, so it really, that's the 30% design exercise, not the complete design.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just envision if you were doing a proposal for the whole project, because you have relationships with people that most of those pieces you'd have pinned down.
Yeah.
And be part of it already.
No, we have that. We have those relationships, but we
We do.
Yeah. You know.
No, I mean,
Well,
we
no,
have
we gotta
no
work with-
authority to come on your property and figure all this
No.
stuff out. And we would have to work with your engineers that
to figure it
already
out.
have that information for us to try to
Figure out what you got, what you're comfortable with. You know, these are all things.
We would make that decision internally. If we needed outside help, we bring in outside help. It would be our decision. It would be our staff's recommendation. We do this in other areas. They've got a lengthy experience in
Sure.
moving that in and out. Al, and then sorry, after you.
Through you, Mr. Chairman,
And I'm sorry. Is that Peter?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Can we take Peter? You haven't. I'm sorry, Peter. Go ahead.
Oh, it would stand on its own in the private industry. Without any of the federal money, this is still very profitable and it solves the brown grease problem at the waste treatment plant. But it is profitable without any of those grants. These grants have been around, the RINs have been around for over 10 years. We don't expect them to go away. The mixing credit and the manufacturing credit, the blender's credit went away for a while under the last administration. But when they realized they were bankrupting all the farmers by not giving them those subsidies, they put those grants back in place. They just, again, were renewed again. So they're out there. I think it's incumbent upon us to get as much money for the MDC as we can with this project. So we need to figure a way to go after those. It just adds icing to the cake.
Yeah. I think that's. Thank you, Peter. Go ahead, Al, then Gary.
yeah,
Gotta go green.
Go green, go green.
I would imagine that from the standpoint of dealing with the technical issues, that you folks pretty much have a handle on that. I would think that at the next level, the issue is going to be, how do you engineer this from a financial or organizational standpoint? In other words, there are a lot of pieces that essentially would not fit us as a municipality or nonprofit. So that essentially you're going to have to either have a private partner or basically have a legislative framework that enables us, when I say us, I mean if we were involved together, to move things around so that essentially there can be an appropriate flow of funds. Because I think essentially what we're looking for is, one, how to solve the problem with regards to the fats, oils, and grease. But more particularly, we've got revenue issues. In other words, we've got to have hard dollars. I think that that is going to entail financial engineering. And that means that maybe we too have to talk to the people who have financial savvy, understand public-private partnerships, and maybe even, God forbid, you talk to the Morgan Stanleys of the world to figure out how to piece this together. But it's not insurmountable. I mean, I think, but that's something I think that we have to understand, that if you look at it as we stand now, one can come to the conclusion, well, we can't use the credits or the subsidies because basically we just don't fit. But I think that's where we're going to have to think about it. And I think work not only the legislative, but the administrative process to work this thing out.
You make a terrific point, and I went to Morgan Stanley in New York and sat with them and talked about all of our projects. We look at this state as $150 million in projects. Would they finance it? Would they work with us? What would the financial deals look like? They do municipal bonds all the time. They do public-private partnerships. They said, if you're going to a presentation, would you like us to write a letter and say that we're interested in doing it? I said, no, not at this point. It's great that you're interested, but I don't know what that means. I mean, I would have to work with your attorneys and our attorneys and figure this out. I think what we need first is a recognition that this is legitimate. This is something the MDC would like to do, and look at it as a partnership and answer all of these questions together. We're in this together. We're going to make money. You're going to make money. We're going to solve problems. We need to work through all of these things. Where does the money come from? There's private equity money out there that wants to be involved in some of these deals. Is that the right way to go? I can't honestly answer that at this point, but I'm telling you, those are things we will talk about immediately.
Well, a significant amount of federal money is existing in this infrastructure stuff that hasn't been put into funding patterns yet. I talked for an hour to our lobbyist in Washington the other day, and he says there's an enormous amount of money. It's the movement of the money is the problem we're having right now. People agreeing on a budgetary pattern and so forth, and they're struggling with that down there too. As well as the interest rate going up doesn't help things either in that process. So there are a lot of issues that have to get ironed out in the process. Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you. My question with Danbury is, they got special grants, and what was their local share? After all the grants were put in, what was the actual amount that they had to come up with?
Actually, we get brought into that process towards the end of their financing. And from my understanding, talking with the powers to be in Danbury, DEEP had put in so many requirements into their project that they didn't take the money. They did their own municipal bond and raised the money themselves.
So they paid for the system?
For the whole 125, right? The majority of it.
Well, the whole upgrade in 100% of our facility too.
Yeah, well, the upgrade was driven by phosphorus removal that they did for the treatment.
Correct.
The upgrade for your particular end of the business was paid local share?
Yes,
Correct.
Thank you.
yes.
Further questions?
Chairman?
Go ahead, Commissioner.
This is all quite fascinating, and I guess there'd be two questions here. Other applications, we can also generate power with this, with our byproduct that comes out of the plant?
Biodiesel can just be put into electric, diesel electric generators. They can be biodiesel can run gas turbines,
It's like anything else.
Sure. So that's another part of this that we shouldn't overlook. And then secondly, to you, Mr. Chairman, I guess, if we decided this was something we wanted to pursue, does this now become an RFP, or how does that work?
I refer that to our council.
We've addressed this issue in the past, when this first came on our radar screen, and there's a procurement process that we'd have to go through, so be an RFP.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Now, are there any further questions relative to this?
Let me make one comment. I know the grant thing is important, but to me, that's just something, but put the grants away when we're all done. It has to make money.
Yeah.
And some say the grants is something, but I think we're so far away. I want to see when we're done.
Grants don't hurt in that
No,
process.
no, grants don't hurt, but they're spending time. We got to put something in that once it's built, that every month it makes money, whatever we pay for it, that's a different.
Yeah, I think we just went over if we took the
No, I
credit
say it
and
might-
wins away, the
Sorry,
payback
that-
goes to like 4 years.
Payback.
Yeah,
Good to me, yeah.
correct.
Further questions? There were a series of questions that you responded to. Do you have anything to say about the response or any questions that still exist?
I think they were very thorough. There were a couple questions that, Doc, we're confused where the information came from, but we responded best. If there's any of those questions you feel that we didn't respond to and you want to have someone send us those questions, and we'll respond back.
We're always
again,
available for
but-
follow-up questions too.
Yeah.
I mean,
What we'll do is we'll meet with the staff and determine what their sense of the answers were to the questions. And then
for follow-ups and additional questions.
because with the number of questions here you asked, obviously,
Need a
staff
day.
has a lot more knowledge relative to what we're talking about.
They're gonna need a magnifying glass to read our responses anyway.
Enlarge them.
We just thought you were running low on cash and
That's Doc's fault.
what we'll do is, Scott Jellison, we had two problems. Tyler has had a health problem, and Scott had an emergency that he had to respond to, and that's the reason they're not here today, so.
They're both actually dialed in, so they.
Oh, they are?
Yeah,
Okay,
they are.
great. Okay, so what we'll do is, we will discuss this with staff, and anything, Scott or Tom, do you have any questions you want to express here?
As we mentioned before, we're in the startup phase, so we have not produced B100 biodiesel yet. We've gotten through the whole front end of our system so that we're making this brown grease, which will be the feedstock. We did produce several thousand gallons of the biodiesel when in our New Haven demonstration project a few years ago. But you're correct, we have not produced any biodiesel in Danbury yet.
It would run to a commercial process. This is what you're gonna create in a commercial process.
Right. We're in the process right now of starting up the Danbury plant.
The answer is no, and what's the time period that you think?
4 to 6 weeks.
4 to 6 weeks.
That's what Eric had said earlier. Yeah.
Is that the answer you're looking for, Scott? Anything else?
Well, that's what we want. We had some engineers look at it and did some studies on what's available, but that's part of the next step we want to take is to see what actually comes in the plant. And yeah, we're planning on taking it off the influent, but obviously whatever you skim off your clarifiers, I don't know how your plant's laid out, but I'm sure that goes into some sort of scum holding tank. That's where we would probably take the grease from that point.
Yeah, there had been a lot of questions.
We're doing it in Danbury.
Yeah. See, there were a lot of questions about how we were going to use a rope skimmer to get the grease out of the influent. And the answer that we provide is that we are not going to use a rope skimmer to take grease out of the influent. Most waste treatment plants have standard processes with clarifiers where they generate scum grease. And we would just use that scum grease.
So Danbury we're not piped directly to them, so they're skimming off their clarifiers and they're going to be pumping that out and bringing the scum grease down to us. And we're going to process it from there.
Well, Scott, we're gonna meet with staff, and what we'll do is we'll provide additional information to them if we feel we haven't gotten the answers for it. That work out, Scott? Okay. Any further questions on the committee? Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
For your time.
Feel free to send us questions. We feel we answered all of the questions to the best of our ability, the way they were presented. And if you have more questions, we'll answer them
We're
immediately.
gonna meet with staff, and I'm sure there'll be a follow-up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
And thank you to your staff that helped us put all this together. They were terrific to deal with. Thank you.
Okay, I gotta do a few other things here before we leave. Opportunity for general public comment? Is there anybody on the call-in that would be? Okay. Commissioner's request for future agenda items?
Mr. Chairman? It's not a request for, but what would be our next meeting?
Well, with REA, right now, we don't have one. We gotta meet with staff. So Kelly, why don't you?
I have the schedule. So we were actually just discussing internally the other day. I know
CTEC will be the next, and there's a movement of a week, I believe.
Yeah.
It was scheduled for 7/27. It's gonna go to 8/10. If I haven't seen my schedule yet, so.
If I might, Mr. Chairman, so that's the updated one. The next meeting was going to be next week, 7/20. The 7/27 is the internal meeting, and then 8/10 would be CTEC coming in, and then the next two are also pushed out. We're waiting. We'd heard from the company or some of the companies, and we're waiting from Deep potentially, I think. but I confirmed with the chairman his availability. So I'm hoping today we can update everyone's calendar, but as of right now, I think CTEC is good. So it'd be 7/27 internally, and CTEC would be in on August 10th.
Gotcha.
And I'll obviously send this out to everyone.
As it stands right now, I haven't looked at my schedule.
Mr. Chairman,
Chris?
is the 7:20 meeting is a hold?
7/27?
The 7:20.
7:20 meeting is, I know it's not for what it's intended for, but there was a hold for that date.
That's right.
Do you want to use that date to have the staff discussion?
Yeah, why don't we do that?
Resulting from this presentation?
Yeah,
To you,
and,
Mr. Chairman.
yeah, and then we can talk also about, what is 7/20? What's that? Thursday, right?
Scott's still on the phone on that.
Yes, he is.
Well, we'll touch base with, Tom's still there and Scott's still there. Does that work for you guys, Scott? 7. Okay. Tom, that's good with you?
Tom, you sound great.
Sound good.
All right, so we'll use that time.
Okay, we'll rejuggle those and get back to everybody for the meeting. Okay, if not, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Without objection, we stand adjourned until the 20th.